everyone. Welcome to Getting Hired's second annual National Disability Employment Awareness Month in Action panel. We're going to give it about 30 seconds to a minute, minute and a half to let people come in versus starting right at the moment. And then we will get started with our conversation with our esteemed panelists. So again, everybody, welcome to Getting Hired's NDEAM in Action panel in 2023. I must say, I feel like this NDEAM went a lot faster than some of the previous ones. I can't believe it's already October, the end of October. So I'm super excited to be able to dig into the content that we're going to be sharing today.
We're saving the best for last, right, Amanda?
Yes, absolutely. Want to get all the good knowledge nuggets and best practices together to make sure that next year it's even better. Hopefully not faster, though. Sometimes it's a good thing.
We want to enjoy it. It's true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, well, let's get started. Hello again. Welcome to our second annual NDEAM in Action, National Disability Employment Awareness Month in Action. We are so excited to have you joining us today. I am Amanda Burke, the head of Getting Hired. I am a cisgender woman in her mid to late 30s who is biracial. I have brown curly hair that comes to my shoulders. Today, I'm wearing a flower over my right ear, and I have on a brown shirt and a tan blazer. I am also a very proud professional with a disability, having cerebral palsy, as well as some neurodivergence too. Specifically with my cerebral palsy, I have spastic hemiplegia. It impacts the entire right side of my body. Getting Hired is a professional engagement platform where individuals looking for employment can find opportunities with companies, like our panelists today, that are cultivating inclusive and accommodating environments, regardless of how they identify. We recognize that a person's identity is multidimensional, so our approach is to acknowledge those identities through different intersections, and disability is our foundation, knowing that there are so many people within the US, 1 out of 4 that have a disability, and then from a caregiver perspective, 1 out of 5 individuals who are directly a part of this community. Today, along with my esteemed panel of advocates within our inclusive employer partners, Walgreens, Meta, and Prudential, along with our community partner, the Job Accommodation Network, they'll all be introducing themselves very, very shortly. But together, we are acknowledging, celebrating, and amplifying NDEAM and what we did this month and beyond to support individuals with disabilities. Before we get started into the information, I would like to do a few little housekeeping items. We are recording this right now, just so everybody does know. We do have closed captionings. Very grateful that our shared experience platform, Zoom, does have some built-in accessibility features. At the bottom of your screen, you have the option to be able to do languages, add on closed captioning, as well as additional caption settings, including colors and size. Screen reader compatibility and support is available. You do have the option for keyboard shortcuts in the future in the event that you didn't know, so that you can best utilize this platform. I know a lot of people utilize Zoom. And then there's an option for high contrast mode. As we're speaking, you would like to be able to see things a little bit more vibrantly. And then you have the ability to pin us as speakers as we're talking, if that should help create more accommodations and accessibility for you as well. I will now like to pass it on to our first panelist to be able to introduce themselves.
I am assuming that Amanda's audio has gone out. No worries. I am going to turn it over to Erin Evans to provide your introduction. Erin.
Thank you, Brittany, and hello, everybody. My name is Erin Evans, and I currently work at Prudential Financial in our asset management business, which is PGIM. And I just want to call that out because our brand isn't always known, but we are a top 10 asset manager with Goldman Sachs, Fidelity, JP Morgan. And I started there 3.5 years ago. Prior to that, I worked in higher education for 20 years, working with undergraduate and graduate students with disabilities. I have blonde hair and blue eyes. It's down. It's past my little bit past shoulder length, and I have a denim shirt on because it's nice and warm here in Pennsylvania. So I'll take it. I'll stop there because I have plenty to say, but don't want to take up all the time.
Thank you so much, Erin. And we're going to go right over to Tracy.
Sorry, I had to unmute there. Hi, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity to be here today. I am joining you from the Job Accommodation Network, so thanks to Getting Hired for including us in this important conversation today. I'm a white 51-year-old female with long brown hair, wearing tortoise-rimmed glasses, a white polka dot button-up shirt and cardigan, black cardigan. My pronouns are she and her, and I identify as a member of the LGBTQ+ community. And I'm here as a program leader and director of training and outreach for the Job Accommodation Network. We are a leading source of national and expert guidance on workplace accommodation and disability employment issues. So I'll stop right there and tell you more about that later on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tracy. And we're going to turn it over to Krista Ray.
Hi guys, thanks for joining. My name is Krista Ray Shaflarsky, and I am a People with Disabilities Recruiting Program Manager at Meta, formerly known as Facebook. I am a fair-skinned woman with shoulder-length copper. I think the ladies are calling it cowboy copper. It's like some type of trending hair color. I don't know. We'll go with copper hair, in a black shirt with a gray and white background. And very excited to be here.
Awesome.
Sorry.
Thank you so much, Krista Ray. Natalie.
Hi, thank you for having me. I am a fair-skinned woman with long blonde hair sitting in my library piano room, and I work for Walgreens. I'm on the field disability inclusion team covering the Western region, so I live in Seattle and cover most of the Pacific, the West Coast and some of the inward states from there. And I'm also part of one of our employee resource groups here at Walgreens. We call them BRG's business resource groups, and that one is called Disability Alliance. I'm very newly in a leadership role there as a TA liaison, so kind of helping with folks joining our teams through applications and things like that. So I'm definitely fresher in that role, but it's a pretty like seamless transition between what I do in my day job and then what I could potentially be helping that group with. And my background is started in special education, working in a school for kids with autism as a behavior technician. And then I moved into supported employment as a job coach for a few years, and ultimately was the director of that job coach agency, so covering supported employment services in the greater Seattle area.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for sharing. We really appreciate you being here. And last, but certainly not least, our moderator for today's discussion, the one, the only, Sean.
Hi, thank you so much. Well, first of all, I'm so honored to be among women who are, first of all, I love that it's all women. I have to say, I know that everyone is a part of this conversation, but it just tickles me that this is a women's empowerment moment as well. But I also am just so honored to be among women who are really taking the actions and not just talking about what it is that disability inclusion should be. And just a little introduction. I'm Sean or Shion Horn. I traverse the world with usually 2 shiny ski poles. And I also have cerebral palsy. So that's actually what connected me and Amanda before we even talked about hiring, just being CP Sibs. And right now I'm wearing a red blazer, and I've got I'm also a Jewish woman, by the way. I'm Chinese and Jewish. Yeah, and so I just want to also honor the intersectional part of this conversation because, you know, obviously that affects everything that we are and we do. So I wanted to do a little intro for anyone that might not know about what NDEAM is, or National Disability Employment Awareness Month. It was started in 1945 after the war, I think in consideration of veterans who had been newly disabled. Obviously at that time, they used the word that we don't use, the H word, handicapped. And I wanted to actually take a moment to talk about, and this I think connects to employment so much, the word handicap. The reason we don't use it is actually the historical history of that word is that veterans would have their caps out begging for money. And that's where handicap, having their caps in their hand to ask for money. And, this is why I think employment is such an important topic. And, my history, just a little background, I'm a Forbes contributor, but I really started that. I know we got a wow face reaction for that. I know there's a lot to think about and unpack there. We could do a whole hour just on language and the words, but really, my background was I started running workshops on beauty and self-esteem for girls and women because I grew up in a bubble where I was, I'm an only child. My parents told me anything was possible, and I believed them, and they created almost a bubble for me in which I was unstoppable. Talking about that intersectionality piece, there was never a sense that I wasn't Asian enough, disabled enough, or being a woman was a disadvantage in any way. Everything that made me different to my parents made me more extraordinary. And so I want to be that love and support. And so I started running workshops on beauty and self-esteem because I realized that even though I grew up that way, we don't have control over if we have great parents or support systems. So I want to be that love and support for others. And in the work that I did, as I was running these workshops at NYU, girls 14 to 21, I realized as we were having these conversations, what everybody was really looking for was a sense of purpose. And so when we really dig into that, and employment is such a huge part of that, because everybody there was just looking to do something of meaning, to enact their dreams. And so I think it's really important that we don't just think about this as getting a job, right? This is so much more. This is about a sense of fulfillment and about a sense of what can I do with the gifts that I have. So anyway, so I could go on. I'm not going to. You guys were all very succinct with your answers. So I think I would really love to hear from this group. Obviously we know the history now of what NDEAM is. But I can tell you that even though it's since 1945, my entire life, I never heard about NDEAM until probably about maybe 10 years ago. So I feel like from a corporate standpoint, it's more of a new thing, but I don't know. And I thought maybe we could start with you, Erin. You've been at this, I think, the longest of all of us. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about what NDEAM means to you and what your strategy has been historically.
Sure. Let me also say that I am a person who's neurodiverse as well, of ADD and anxiety. Those are my gifts. They treat me very well and set me up for advocacy and activism, within the disability community. So it's been almost 24 years. Right out of Boston College grad school, I started my career in disability advocacy. And I haven't stopped since then. So NDEAM to me, while it's a Heritage Month, I think about it every day. I celebrate my colleagues around me at my wonderful company, Prudential and PGIM, the folks in my external network. I celebrate, disability inclusion and really accessibility every day. So in October, yes, of course, we plan events and programs for our company. We have articles written and employee storytelling. We have an event that I'm facilitating next week with some of our executives and some of our neurodiverse new hires and their people leaders to talk about why neuro inclusion is so important in the workplace and all of the benefits of having a culture that embraces people with disabilities. And I will say this, it is very much part of a company's DNA. People with disabilities are in all of our companies, whether they take their mask off or not. and so it is inherent that in our work and incumbent upon us to make sure that we include that into our overall DEI strategy for the company. And that is something that we're doing, and I'm very proud of that work. I've been leading the way with a lot of stakeholders at the company. And I would say it's really important to know that the cultural piece and the attraction of talent, yes, is there, but it's also embedding support into everything that we do. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, with the other questions, but I celebrate people with disabilities every day, all day.
I don't doubt it for a second. I can feel your passion, and we so appreciate everything you do every day and look forward to digging in deeper. I would love to call on Krista next. Krista Ray.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this. So my intro was short, so I also wanted to give some more context of I do identify as a person with a disability, ranging from thriving with mental health issues, considered neurodiverse as well, and then have a chronic illness that I've had since 12. And so my perspective today will be split from as an individual, and then also my role, and also that as co-lead for disability at our employee resource group. So bringing all of those perspectives, as well as the intersectionality of my identity to these answers. So I was thinking about it, and National Disability Employment Awareness Month, the way that we've really focused on it this year at Meta, it's been a lot around the employment awareness, and we actually took July to focus on disability pride. And so I call those out to talk about, like, pride. We did a lot of ownership and education and awareness, and just our group, the MRG, likes to have a lot of intimate conversations and kind of discussing things. And for this month, we've been focused a lot more on the intersectionality of employment. So some of our panels have been focused specifically around, we had one on ADHD, late diagnosis ADHD, and a lot of the content was about at work and working. And we've done a lot to highlight accessibility and accommodation. So kind of similar vein, but also trying to point out just the employment awareness a bit more, which I think is where we doubled down on ally education. Because for a lot of us with disabilities, as Erin was saying, or if you're advocates, you're thinking about it day in, day out. You don't need a month to celebrate, to honor, to think about it. But it is a great month to be able to pull other people into the conversation and bring their attention when maybe throughout the year they're not constantly thinking about it. We know within the ableist society that we live in that disability is not top of mind for most people. Even when you say the word diversity, some people will leave our community out. And so this has been a big focus on how do we really think about educating hiring managers, interviewers, other folks like that. So that's kind of where we are moving through things specifically this year at Meta. I hope that gives more context. Happy to dive in a bit deeper, but I want to share the floor with some others.
Love that. And I think that's such an important distinction that you're making there. Also, the idea that it is true that these awareness months are not for the people living this every day. It's for everyone else to understand why it's so important to recognize people who are not like us and include everyone in the conversation. And I think, one thing I love to say about allyship too is it's not about never making mistakes, but it's okay, how do we react if we get feedback, or if we realize we haven't been including someone in the conversation? What do we do next? Right. So thank you so much for that. I would love to go to Natalie, and then Tracy. I'm going to have a little bit of a different question for you, but connected to this. Natalie, thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Going back to your question about just this month in general and what's my perspective, what's my philosophy / the Walgreens perspective and philosophy. I definitely agree with what Erin was saying. It's not just the month of October, it's a work in progress year round. This is a great time to reflect, like, how are we doing? Are we measuring our efforts in whatever way we can measure them? What's working, what's not working? I would say we've had like a twofold approach to it. Really just taking this month and using it to kind of hit all the resources that we have and really blast those out to our employees. So we wrapped up our self-ID campaign actually earlier, but we had the results back by the time that this month rolled around. And so the self-ID campaign went really well. It was an opportunity for our existing team members to go into their employee profiles and to voluntarily and confidentially self-disclose disability, sexual orientation, veteran status, gender identity. And we saw, a massive response to the efforts of the campaign. And we actually saw a pretty significant increase to our baseline of last year. So this month we were able to have the results and to see that 8.4% of our US team members identified as having a disability. And that's compared to last year's baseline of 5.7%. So I give a lot of credit to the people that really worked that self-ID campaign. Even something as, to us, it's simple, but just interface, like how usable is the site? Is the button calling to you like, this is where I click it, this is how I do it? And then we did a lot of trying to break stigma. Who's going to see my results? Why should I do it? Why does the company need me to do this? Why do I need to do it for myself? So just having open conversations. And then the second fold of our approach as a team, and really the passion for me is rolling out inclusion in the field. It's why I joined this company, was not just because I came in at a time where Walgreens was the first company in the S&P 500 to make a disability inclusion representation metric that was going to be part of that incentive plan. So I was like, that's a great sign. And now we're, a year in as a team, and we're starting to kind of see the fruits of our labor company wide and as a team. And as a team, what we focus on is just being an advocate for any professional with a disability that is trying to join our team and explore their careers. One of the really exciting ways we do that is by offering an optional, inclusively designed training program, not just in one space at Walgreens, but in multiple industries. So in our retail, in our warehouses, in our pharmacy micro-fulfillment, and even in our corporate offices. And that doesn't just happen in October. We don't just set those up in October and look to see what we can do in 31 days. We do that year round. So it's been an exciting month, and the work continues. It's always great to be able to celebrate the milestones, but there's still so much good work to be done. And maybe later in the panel, I'll have the chance to go into a little bit more about what those initiatives designs look like for us at Walgreens, if that's, desired by your audience.
We will definitely get to that. And I love your holistic approach. And again, the reminder that this is all year. It's so important. But Tracy, I have a little bit of a different, because obviously you don't have an ERG or a BRG or an MRG, but you are supporting so many organizations in doing this work. So I would love to hear what you do as support and, an advisor in this month to those that you work with and your clients.
Sure. Well, thanks for, again, this opportunity. Again, I'm here from a little bit of a different perspective than our great panelists here, who are employers who are doing the work, boots on the ground. They're really in it. I'm here to talk about a little bit about what Jan does and how we can support these employers in the work that they do. For those of you who don't know about our service, we've been around for a long time. We're actually celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. Jan was a service that started back in 1983. And our goal was to gather and share information about effective accommodation solutions to help more employers across the United States successfully employ workers with disabilities. Of course, the employment landscape has changed dramatically since 1983, but our underlying goal still remains the same, and that's to help create more inclusive workplaces by ensuring workers with disabilities have access to the tools and the supports they need to be successful on the job. So, you talk about all of these great panelists are talking about how, NDEAM happens every day. It happens for us too. We're here talking about how we can ensure that workers with disabilities have the supports that they need in order to do their best work. We're talking to employers about how to create environments where people feel as though they can share information about their disability and ask for what they need in order to do their best work. We understand that job accommodations really play a vital role in creating inclusive workplaces. And so when employees with disabilities have the accommodations they need on the job, they can really perform their best. They can contribute their unique skills and their perspectives and their talents and be included in that work environment. And so, I'd say Jan is here as a partner. We are here to be that sort of partner that an employer can reach out to. We're here kind of, I would say, changing minds and perspectives every day. There are a lot of employers who don't have the experiences that these employers have, and they don't know what to do when someone comes to them and says, I'm having some trouble doing my job, and it's because I might have this disability or health condition or limitation, and I want to be able to do my best work, but I'm not really sure how to approach it or what I need even in order to do that. So we're not here to judge. We know that people are going to make mistakes. I know, Sean, you were talking about, sometimes we don't always get it right, but we're here to kind of be a voice to help people figure it out and work with them through the process, give the employers as well as others the information and the tools they need to ensure that individuals with disabilities have a place in that work environment, and to ensure that they're considered to be part of that workplace and have the opportunity to really drive innovation and progress within that organization. So we do that by talking to thousands. We have over 40,000 contacts a year from employers and individuals alike, and also resources who may be supporting individuals in the accommodation process. So we're here as a free resource, a consultation service that can help provide that support and ensure that inclusion is thought of every single day.
I loved everything you said. And I just want to say also that what you are talking about made me think about another statistic. Entrepreneurship is 2.5 times higher within the disability community, but a lot of the reason for that is not as positive as you would think, in that I believe that a lot of people with disabilities are afraid because they don't realize they have Jan as a resource, and they don't realize all the things that Walgreens and Meta and Prudential are doing, and all these companies are doing to include them, and they're afraid to ask for accommodations. So often what we've been taught, I will say, even growing up, whoever was different. I think this has changed in the last, I would say, 10 years since social media, maybe. But I feel like there was a pervasive idea that if you were different, it was your job to be scrappy and adapt. And so I think that a lot of people want to get jobs, but don't want to have to explain that, oh, I need this accommodation or that accommodation. And so it's, in a way, it's not easy to start your own business, but I think for some people, it feels easier. If I work for myself, I don't have to explain to anybody. But I think if more people knew that they had Jan, and then that would change. And hopefully, obviously, so whatever I can do to support getting the word out about Jan, that would be great, because I know that there's so many people waiting for you that haven't already tapped into you. So thank you for sharing. I guess, it would be a great time now to talk a little bit more. Let's talk to some of the corporations about, because we want to go even deeper. What has been the ethos traditionally? Let's start with Erin again, because you've been at this the longest. what has been the ethos at Prudential? Maybe there's something that you've brought to Prudential in the last 3.5 years. What's the ethos and what is the strategy currently that we can bring into the future for Prudential and for you, Erin?
Sure. I want to just level set here for people to know that while I've been there with Prudential for 3.5 years, and I've been focused on disability inclusion, that was what I was hired originally for with the company. I am just relentless, persistent. I have tenacity, and I don't stop. I don't slow down.
That counts
So
as a strategy, Erin. That counts
that's
as a
my
strategy.
strategy, partially. So what I'm going to say, it's going to sound like, wow, you know, if you're just getting started, you're thinking about it, it's really, you know, I've gotten a lot accomplished because I just don't stop. And so it seems like a lot, but so let me just say that. So I was hired to build out a strategy, and that was during the pandemic. And so a couple things happened that was very helpful, in addition to me building out, you know, listening sessions of employees with disabilities, their managers, and trying to understand how the remote working environment was having a positive and or, you know, a negative impact on some of our employees with disabilities. It was a great way to kind of start listening. A couple things happened, events that go on at your companies, and there were opportunities for me to put a spotlight on what we could do more of. And so I will tell you this, I put together lots of project plans around HR, around procurement, to stop the bleeding of buying products and services that aren't accessible to people with disabilities. I worked very closely with talent acquisition, and because I came from the college environment, this is one thing that worked extremely well, is that I knew what colleges that we should go after that hire that have great programs for students with disabilities. So Gallaudet, so we can hire deaf students and hard of hearing students. Landmark College, so we can get more neurodiverse students. The Blind Institute for Technology, so we can bring in more blind talent. Things of that nature. And I knew that I also had to do a lot of education, training, and awareness at the same time as I was building this community of support and champions. So I'm a good listener too, even though I like to talk a lot. I also, I have a counseling degree. I was going to be a clinician. So, I'm a pretty good listener. And one of the things that I kept seeing happen from an employee engagement perspective, there were so many employees who had family members, loved ones, but children with disabilities who kept raising their hands. How can I help? How can I help? How can I help? So when people offer to help me as a one-person operation, I found ways for those people that raised their hands to help me. So how did I do that? Having them remove roadblocks for me, having them do programs and panels, having them help me build out the roadmap. Helping me find solutions and get to the right people who make the decisions, because one of the most important points here is having the ability to influence senior leaders is critically important. I mean, that's part of, the Walgreens story, which, I can't, Natalie, I want to talk to you another time because I love what Walgreens has done. But so I will say this, we have work streams through HR, through procurement, through talent acquisition, through real estate, facilities, all of the avenues around where disability inclusion and accessibility matters. We have accessibility criterion, all of these things, because we've got these work streams and we're all actively working on it, building out these SOPs, trying to do the storytelling, looking at accommodations from a more inclusive standpoint, not just the cookie cutter, menu of a captioning or an interpreter or JAWS and Braille display, but really trying to be more supportive and thoughtful around the type of accommodations we provide. And you know, that's been really important. You know, we learned a lot about blindness when we onboarded a blind leader. So that in and of itself, you know, got the company in fast moving mode, because we are a very, very, very caring company. Our senior leaders care very much about us. So it was something that we did very quickly. And then I'll say this, the hiring piece has been very important to me, and the self-IDing, so that the culture changes. So like Natalie said, since I've been there just in the last 2 years, our numbers are similar to Natalie, and but they doubled, you know. And in our self-ID efforts, we don't do a campaign anymore. We try to do the self-ID every day and communicate it in all these pockets, and we call it Count Me In. And but I was able to keep dashboards, and what Natalie was saying before, measure it. So there are KPIs that I was able to establish. There's metrics, and then I was able to establish why we have to include accessibility and disability inclusion into our DEI strategy. So right now we've got executive sponsorship. I have some executives that came out based on, you know, the relationships that I've had. And so we're a work in progress, but for those of us that are in the space, it never ends, right? It's a journey, and your roadmap gets adjusted. And I'm just proud of my company, because so many people care about this as much as I do. And I'm happy to answer any other questions about that. But I figure that's a lot in and of itself.
Well, this is why I told you in the pre-call, Erin, that I think we could do easily a fireside chat with just you. We'll have to do that in the future. I would love to call on Natalie next, and then Krista to share more about what the ethos is and your strategy going forward.
Sure. Erin's hard to follow up. Yeah, we should talk offline, Erin. Well, I guess if I had to sum up the ethos, I'll speak for my team. I'll speak for what our ethos is. And I would say the first thing that comes to mind is that disability inclusion and efforts around disability inclusion are not just a checkbox. It's not as simple as saying, hey, we did this thing. This thing is supposed to be, you know, the feel goodies, and therefore we're done. And in the same way, it's not, hey, if we open up disability inclusion and we really focus our efforts on one type of position at Walgreens, that's awesome, but that's pretty limiting. So that's why our programs and our hiring efforts are not limited to one space within Walgreens or one type of position. So for example, we're not saying, hey, if you are a professional with a disability, you are welcome to come work in our warehouses. That's where we've got a curriculum designed, but don't ask me about if you want to work in stores or pharmacy or leadership roles or corporate. That's not what we're saying, because that is a bit of a checkbox items to say, well, we opened it up in one area, one realm, and therefore we did disability inclusion right. So I think we lead with that perspective. And I think additionally, it's our culture is that we can measure specific parts about disability inclusion with numbers, and there are some parts that we can't. There are some parts that are qualitative. And I think Sean really hit on that in your opening about like value, purpose. Employment ties really closely in with purpose. And so we consider that in our messaging and our curriculum and how we network and in how we receive feedback to try and make our programs better. And I think lastly, it's just we don't claim to be experts. That's why we lean so heavily on job coach agencies, school transition programs, anybody that's involved in supporting people with disabilities. We invite them to be that support physically, by email, by phone, just really just as involved as that professional with a disability wants and needs them to be, because, we don't claim to be experts. So with all that said, our strategy, kind of like I said earlier, is to offer these disability training programs in several of our different spaces where we provide a curriculum, we provide a checklist that's going to guide the process, and very transparent criteria and competencies that we say ahead of time, hey, this is what we look for in a successful team member. And they reflect really closely, if not the exact same as what our performance reviews look like, or what our interview competency evaluations look like when we're interviewing new team members. So our goal is equal jobs, equal pay. So we're holding people, professionals with disabilities and those without, to the same standards and expectations, but we're giving them a chance to level the field. So come in with your job coach if that's what suits you. Learn this position at your own pace with individualized support. And it's a massive win-win, because our hiring managers, if they don't have lived experience with a person with a disability, or professional experience working with a professional with a disability, they get a chance to really see it in action. That's where we talk about, like, hey, you were looking for somebody to fill a role, and when you're looking at resumes, you're looking for certain things on paper, but what do you start to notice if it's somebody doing more of a working interview? And our programs, we could call them a working interview, but what kinds of things do you start to notice? What talents are there that you're like, oh my gosh, if this person only did this task, and we're not going to limit them to this task, but even if they did this task at the level that they're doing it, that is so helpful. And I might not have caught that if I looked at a resume or whatever it may be. And those are just examples. But Sean, did you want me to go through, if I focused on our model that's like recruit, train, hire, that would be in our retail program. Do you want me to go through that cadence right now?
Maybe we could come back to that.
Sure.
I mean, I'm just even glad that you mentioned it right now. And I wanted to talk a little bit to a couple of your points, in that I think what you're really saying, I love the part about humility, where a lot of times just being an ally is understanding what you don't know so that you can get more information from the people who do. And also, I believe that privilege itself is not a villain. It's when we don't use our privilege to make space for someone else, or to know when it's not our turn to speak and maybe pass the microphone and make space for someone who isn't there, who should be there. That's where privilege becomes a villain, if you're not using your privilege to make space for others. And so I want to give that as a positive towards you and Walgreens, in that having that humility, to me, is the sign of the greatest ally. Is not telling me how to live my life and what it's like for me to have a disability, but asking, what don't I know that I need to know in order to support you? So I just want to honor that. And then, of course, Krista Ray, you have the floor.
Yeah. So I think I can talk about strategy first from a recruitment perspective, since that's my core role, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we're building. So within strategy, part of our big thing is meeting people where they are. So last week we joined Getting Hired at y'all's virtual career fair, trying to really put ourselves out there, because I think when a lot of people think Meta or Facebook, you might not think disability inclusion. And so really making sure that we're not just relying on our brand of like, well, we're a big company, people know us if they want to look at our job board, but getting out there and having conversations like this, and going to those virtual career fairs, and doing our own events. And so that's a big part of meeting people where they are. The other big piece is education internally, is making sure that we're constantly educating our recruiters, hiring managers, interviewers, whoever is interacting with our, and this is just from the recruitment standpoint, who is interacting with candidates. And one of the big things there is really pressing upon folks of you don't need to know who has a disability. I don't actually like, I don't want you to know. I don't want you to probe. I don't want you to over rely on self ID, and obviously that stuff's kept so separate. I want you to assume that every person that comes through your pipeline has a disability. And if we think about 26% of Americans, that's 1 in 4, every fourth person statistically would. You don't know who, so let's always lead with this disability inclusive narrative and framework, and making sure that we're supporting that. So yes, we could rely on an accommodation statement that's in every single one of our emails, but let's start talking about it. Let's make sure that when we think about, like when someone asks about, well, why should I work there? We can lead with some of the amazing disability inclusive benefits that we have, whether that's autism, therapy coverage or cancer care coverage or fertility benefits. I think a lot of times our recruiters will leave those to like, oh, if I'm talking to a woman, it's like, no, if you're talking to anyone with an immune disorder, they also could benefit from that. LGBTQ. So like really thinking about how do we lead with these narratives. And a lot of that is done through the education of who's interacting. I can go on, but I want to make sure I'm saving time. And so one of the other things to think about is so recruitment, but I also want to talk about the ethos and kind of strategy for once folks get here. And I am the first to say we are not perfect. We are not done. It is not going to be all rainbows and butterflies because we are a microcosm of society. So you're going to interact with people who haven't figured out, how to get rid of their ableism yet, because but it doesn't mean that we don't care, and it doesn't mean that we're finished or that we're satisfied. And I think what is most inspiring to me is that there is a group of very dedicated people, some with disabilities, some that are just advocates that are working day in, day out to improve this place. And I think that's the biggest thing. And infusing that with the by us, for us, nothing without us type of mentality, and really making sure that everyone else that's working on this, that from a grow and keep perspective, when we think about employees that are here, that folks know that we are here. People with disabilities are currently at Meta. We're not waiting for them to arrive. We are amongst you. And we need to make sure that folks, even if they aren't self-IDing, if they're not disclosing to managers, can still have access to things without there being a huge burden. And so that's one of the things that we're always looking at is like, all right, everyone gets a standing desk, then no one needs to ask for a standing desk. Noise canceling headphones are in the machines, no one has to ask for it. So how do we get some of that stuff out there so that folks don't feel like they are, that pressure that you feel when you go to accommodations, like I need something. And so it's getting that message out of like, we want dignity, we want pride, but we also need to talk about equity, because equity is sometimes that I might need something more that you see as more or different to do the same thing equally. And that's really a conversation I feel like that we're having. So internally, my big focus is how do we create soft landings for folks that after we do all this amazing recruitment, when they come in, can be happy. And I think part of that is saying like, it's not a finished product, but we're willing to, and that feedback is going to be so critical. So that's what I keep trying to share when I think about the community that I lead within Disability At, of saying like, bring those voices, let me know, and we feed back to our executive sponsor, we feed back to a NDEAM specific sponsor, and then I get to feed back into our task force around recruitment, retention, things like that. So lots of streams. And I think that's one of the big strategies is what do people need and how are we working towards that? And then it's just every day, bit by bit, like it's, there's no silver bullet for this. It is labor of love. And it takes time. And I think that's just where it's important that, folks know, yeah, we would have liked it to be yesterday, but that's also why we can't take our foot off the gas. So that's kind of when we think about ethos, mindset, strategy, from both, like I said, of the community and then for the community. I hope that helps.
Oh my God, that is so fantastic. And it really hones in on something I was thinking about when Natalie started talking about inclusion, because something I always say when we talk about inclusion is that we really should be focused on integration throughout, rather than just like a segregated, okay, we have an ERG, we have I think it should be company wide, and you just expressed that so beautifully in all the actions you're taking. So I would love to, Tracy, a slightly different question, because obviously you're working with these companies, but can you take us through maybe some things that you commonly see when working with corporations, that, or what you wish that companies knew so that you wouldn't have, I mean, you want to do the work, but I mean, I always say with self-esteem, my dream is never to have a job again, right? If everybody knew they were valuable and beautiful, then I would not have a job. I'd be really happy. So what do you wish that employers knew? What do you wish that employees knew? What can you share?
Actually, Sean, yeah, I was thinking as Krista Ray was talking about how, it would be amazing to always be able to lead with thinking that everyone has a disability, because like you said, then we don't have to think about asking for an accommodation. And of course, I come to you from the accommodation perspective and talking about how do we go about ensuring people have what they need, but it sure would be nice to never have to ask for an accommodation ever. So I think, ultimately that would be the goal. Ultimately, I wouldn't have a job then, but the goal would be that people could just have what they need in order to do what they need to do. When we talk with employers and individuals, I think one of the things that's important is that we look at every situation uniquely. Every circumstance is unique, and we don't ever look at accommodations from an in-the-box type scenario. And so if that's one thing I could say, is that when, people do ask us, well, what about an accommodation for X? Well, tell us more. We need to know more about this situation. Tell us about this person, this individual that you're working with, who you're trying to employ or keep employed. What are their skills? What can they do? What do they bring to the table? And then what might be needed to assist them in order to perform at their highest level. So when we think about accommodations, yeah, I think it was Erin that mentioned, we think of interpreters, and we think of, screen readers, and, those things that you might have heard about or might have had some exposure to. But, accommodations are just about any support that are ultimately going to enable an individual to participate in the employment experience. And that is anything from workplace flexibility to assistive technology to adjusting how we interact with each other, how we communicate with each other. So, as far as what employers are asking us about, I think, they're coming to us with those unique circumstances. They want to do what they can to make adjustments where it's possible. But they're also, I think when we think about making those accommodations, a lot of those adjustments are made generally for everybody. We just don't call it a special accommodation. And maybe if we could get a little further away from that and provide what people need, it wouldn't be, quite such a big deal. We know that employers do ask, questions around the process of providing accommodation, how to engage in that. And we work through that with them. We're there to kind of lead them from the very beginning of recognizing whether someone's even asked for an accommodation to exploring various solutions, working with our team of consultants. And sometimes employers ask for things like, how costly is it to provide accommodations? Jan does do a survey of past users of our service to kind of get some general ideas around the cost of accommodations. And we know that for the most part, 50% of those people that we survey say accommodations cost nothing. And the reason for that is because oftentimes, again, there are those adjustments that we make for everybody. It's a schedule modification. It's allowing them time off when they need it. It might be changing the way we interact with people, or how somebody engages with their supervisor. So those things that really don't cost anything. So I think, I don't know. I think ultimately, Jan is here to kind of help individuals just work through that process. We know that it's not a one-size-fits-all type scenario, whether it's inclusion or accommodations. And so we're really here to kind of just be that one-on-one individual provider to provide that consultation and assistance.
Yeah. Small note to your point, Tracy, is that the Department of Labor recently published a study where the average cost of an accommodation was only $400. And I want to just take a moment while you're talking about this to say I was speaking at the New York Stock Exchange on a TV show, and they had a high chair, and the accommodation in that case was just getting me a chair of the right height. So that cost them nothing. So I do want to, anyone who's afraid about accommodations, they do not have to cost you anything. It's just forethought a lot of the time. Anyway, we are so passionate that we're almost out of time. We wanted to give people a few minutes. I think we have time for maybe one question. And I would love to, Amanda, it would be great if you could pick the question for me, because
I'm here for you, Sean. We just received a question. What kind of assistive technology do you use, and what impact does it have in your work productivity?
Who's that question for? Is that for me as a person with a disability? Is that for the employers here, or?
There was no further context that was provided.
Okay, that was for me.
Was
okay,
for you. Awesome.
Great.
Thank you for that context. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Elizabeth. Well, I have to say that most of my accommodations are hardware. So it's my 2 ski poles, for example. I'm not a fast typist, so another accommodation, I have an assistant that will type things out for me to save time. So I might be the wrong person even though I did judge an assistive technology competition and I've seen it change lives, I can tell you someone I judged alongside that competition with through AT&T had autism, and his parents didn't even know, because he was nonverbal, the extent of his deep thinking until he was given something like an iPad to communicate, and now he blogs. So technology can be a complete game changer, and the way he connects with his family and professionally has completely changed. I would love, do we have any, I guess we don't have time for any more questions. I think what I would like to lead people with is, not everybody works at Walgreens, Meta, or Prudential and has the privilege of doing this at this level. But I want to encourage everyone here has something that they can do and some level of privilege. Like I was privileged in love. And so now I'm giving that love back in the form of advocacy. But I encourage everyone here to think about what are some actions that you can take, no matter your position, to foster more disability inclusion, and make sure that NDEAM, or National Disability Employment Awareness Month, continues all year. I would love for Amanda, you could take it from here, but thank you so much for having us all. I learned so much from each of you. I hope we all stay in touch, and let's do that fireside chat with every single one of you.
Yes, I think getting down into some of those specifics and focuses is truly how to elevate this to the next level, right? We've done such a great job being able to talk about things a little bit more than a surface level of best practices and where it starts. And inclusion starts with I. And that I is you, no matter who you are, with a disability or without a disability. And what can you be doing to help influences the processes within your organization and at your own dinner table, and the people that you're with. I think that there are so many parallels to different identities and the things that we talked about today. I'm so grateful for all of the action-driven and focused conversation that we had today. We've got about 2 minutes, so I have a challenge for everybody. If you could pick one key takeaway to share to this audience, knowing that it's focused on workforce and workplace and that equity, what would you leave us with? If anybody has anything ready to go, just go ahead and say it out loud, but would love to know if any of our panelists would like to end with
the biggest thing I always tell people is know thyself. And what I mean by that is, whether it's in the current job that you have, when you go into like ways of working with your manager, you first have to know yourself. You have to know what you need. You have to know what your triggers are. When you go to accommodations, they're going to come back and be like, well, what do you need? And so I think it's really just, I think we always think about the future. We think about what role I'm in or what I want to do. Take an audit of yourself. What are you passionate about? What do you need? What support? What are the things that make you uncomfortable? But I think doing that audit is always just really important, and whether it's ways of working or applying jobs, what have you. So if you haven't checked in with yourself, check in with yourself.
I love that. Self-audit for what can I do to optimize my own success. Phenomenal.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I would say, just because in our life, we, don't really focus on ableism. I think that that's just something that all of us can do, is understand what it is, understand the history of the disability rights movement, and understand some of the leaders in the space. I would say the education of yourself for yourself will help you interact with others more effectively. And I would say, check your stereotypes, realize we all have biases when we make decisions. And it's okay as long as you work to mitigate those. And I just think that it's really important to meet people where they're at, and not make assumptions about what people need. And you'll see your world will burst open wide if you can just do that. Listen and ask.
Love it.
Love that, Erin. Natalie, did you want to add anything else?
Well, I'll plug Down for Love because I just watched it on Netflix, and I watched it 2 times in a row because it was so good. I had already watched Love on the Spectrum. Still, I mean, everybody brought really, great key takeaways that would be repetitive. So that's what came to mind was, if you are dipping your toes into just NDEAM in general, disability inclusion in general, and you don't know where to start, maybe watch that show. Maybe just like keep your eyes open for considering that there are people that live with invisible disabilities, like who around you, just perspective shift, and just be observant. That's my key takeaway for folks.
Yeah, could I just quickly plug the Real Abilities Film Festival, which I'm on the selection committee for. I am biased, but that's another resource. They have a streaming platform now, so anyone all over the country can watch films that are firsthand narratives about different disabilities. This is how I learn as an ally, right? Because I only have CP. Have one perspective on disability. So anyway, I know we're over time, but I just wanted to put that out there. There are ways to learn more that don't require necessarily having someone right in front of you. Okay, thank you.
You're spot on. Great ad, Sean. I think everybody put their head down and wrote that when you shared it. Real Abilities. I'll be checking it out. Tracy, from your perspective, last nugget. It's 1:02, I know, but just want to be able to give you a moment.
Truly, I don't know that I can top everything that everyone said here. So you all are fantastic. Keep doing what you're doing in your spaces. One thing I always say is we always need to take a positive approach to everything. We try to talk with employers and everyone else to always engage with a positive, solution-oriented outlook. So keep looking forward, keep looking to progress, and keep learning and keep doing better.
Yes. Well, thank you everyone again for joining us today. Thanks to our panelists. Please go check out the organizations and the employers. They are hiring now. They are looking for individuals with disabilities and without, but want to make sure that they're having culture adds to their organizations, not just culture fits. So thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next time on our next Getting Hired event. Bye, everybody.